let's do some COVID stuff again to give people some flavor. You know, the beginning of COVID, investing wise, was all who's going to have a vaccine, who has PPE, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, there's good money to be had. Now, you know, first things first, Jeff, maybe what do you look at in a COVID stock? Would you be an investor? If you were, what do you look for? And I'm not saying, you know, necessarily someone with a cure, but just someone dealing with COVID, whether that's from testing, you know, creating testing kits, creating, you know, some type of equipment that tests for COVID or anything in between. What's your quick takes?
Yeah, no, great question. Obviously very topical. I love them all. I think there's some phenomenal opportunities to be short that entire sector. I think it is. I think it's the ultimate in hype job. I mean, it's as clear as a bell. And you know, Trump has said it a bunch of times that he'll get a vaccine to the market, but he's going to make it cost absolutely zero, almost. So other pharmaceutical companies have said the same thing, that we're going to deliver a vaccine at zero, almost. So if everyone's delivering a product at zero, where's the profit margin? So much like the cannabis industry, you know, 5 years ago, you know, the Canadians, Americans, or 3-4 years ago, oh yeah, we're going to be doing this. We're building this out in, you know, Northern Ontario where it's minus 45 Celsius. And we're going to build a, you know, a cannabis plant. It's like, what? Like, what are you thinking? Like, so it's the same thing here for me with the COVID thing. I mean, yes, it's terrible. It's been a terrible experience, pandemic for the world, no doubt about it. But the hype that's now in so many of these stocks where people are claiming they have a vaccine or they're going to help this way or that way or this way, this hype is going to go away soon. And, you know, there will be some vaccines that do come to market that do help people soon. I don't know the date, but soon. And it will just go away, much like the flu did. And you know, I don't want to get into, you know, I'm not an expert, obviously, I'm not a doctor, so it's not for me to say, you know, what is or what isn't scientifically or medically at this point. I do have my own opinions, but I do know that if I'm to look at COVID as a chart, you know, it had its massive peak and it came down, it formed a little base, and it's had a little bit of a peak up again. To me, if I look at it like a chart, it looks to me that at some point it's going to kind of fade away and go away. And it just won't be an interesting subject matter anymore. In terms of the big picture, there'll always be COVID to test. Don't get me wrong. Biologically, there's a lot to be done there. We've learned a lot through COVID. So us at our company, we wrote about this back in March. We wrote about the potential benefits of cannabis with inflammation related to cardio and breathing and COVID and everything. And I remember like a bunch of people wrote in saying, are you guys nuts? Like there's no correlation at all. You guys are nuts. You don't know what you're talking about. Well, here we are a bunch of months later. And in fact, in South Africa, we don't have anything to do with it, but in South Africa, there's a current trial going on using medicinal cannabis and testing for COVID and doing, not testing for COVID, but seeing how it can help with COVID. So what people thought we were nuts about a long time ago, back in March, 6 months ago, are now looking at, oh, wow, so that's for real. So there have been some tremendous learnings to be had through all this. But as a sector in the market that's been overhyped, I think it has been, and I would definitely be short a lot of these stocks, in particular, a lot of the junior stocks with nothing behind them, zero. I mean, you just got to read through when you read these press releases and somebody says to you, these junior companies, oh, well, we plan to get into this industry if this is going to happen, and if that happens, we'll be doing this, and if this happens. Well, you just got to read that. In other words, what they're really telling you is that they got nothing at the moment and they're doing nothing about it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, especially for the whole curing side and anything to do with the actual virus. The one part that I find a lot interesting, you already said it's been a big learning experience, and for both governments, businesses, everybody. from a testing for viruses standpoint, I think there's a lot of cool technologies that are coming out of it. For example, being able to test, in water purification plants, like the health of a city. What I think a
Right.
lot of people are getting to is, well, instead of having to quarantine the whole world, what if we just knew it was here, earlier, and we could just be like, oh, wow, you guys are, we got to get rid of this. We're going to be testing, even just a building's water. Think of an apartment building. If you could test, the water coming out of it for COVID, whether or not someone in your building has it or you're clean. I think that technology is pretty interesting. I think there's a lot of, good steps moving in that direction. Jeff, what's your thoughts?
It is, but by the same token, it's will we really need to be testing for COVID in a year? I don't know. We don't go around testing people for the flu.
So maybe just, I'm not so much talking COVID. Maybe even if it's just testing for the flu, testing for,
Well,
who knows what it is in the future. That's kind of where I'm coming from.
So on that note, I think there's something to be said for that. That's cool. But back to the original question, there are a bunch of companies that have been pumped up and hyped up based on testing for COVID.
Yeah.
Those particular stocks, huge opportunity to be short. They're going to zero, almost. So, but in terms of testing in apartment buildings for, diseases, I mean, that's super interesting. Absolutely. Very interesting.
I find it very peculiar that it took a global pandemic for us to put focus on hygiene and really get developments there. Like, does it really require a pandemic for us to start washing hands often, thinking of what we touch, where we cough, who we sneeze on, or what we sneeze on? That's been particularly interesting for me too. We're very very peculiar. And in terms of the innovation, I think that this time around we really saw some progress compared to the SARS episode several years ago, which was just as horrible, but it wasn't global. It was very local. It had severe repercussions for those who were affected. Death rate was 10%. So if that one got out of hand, it would have been way bigger issue on our plate than it is today. But COVID has really sparked some interesting innovations in, as you mentioned, testing, detection, which we can figure out how to use for the upcoming or the next issues we will see with the pandemics or any other viruses that we will face, which according to Bill Gates is the next wars we will see. We will have very few wars between countries, but it will be more between humans and viruses and bacteria. Many companies in the sanitation cleaning side of things where they're disinfecting, right? So disinfecting companies have really sparked some innovation and created some new amazing products.
So a good question back to you, Jeff, and Luca just made me think of it. So, you'd be short on anyone doing curing or again, testing for COVID, which I think is great advice. What's your idea on PPEs and, all those companies that blew up, whether it's masks or, ventilators, you name it, similar answer, or do you have a different idea?
Absolutely. I mean, back in March when I started getting in my email box 3-4 inquiries a day, or on LinkedIn 3-4 inquiries a day. Hey, we make millions of masks in China, and do you need to buy masks? And I would wake up and go, absolutely, I need 1 million masks. Everybody does. Like, who are these people? And when you start seeing that type of BS floating around and your buddies are calling you, hey dude, I got a great deal. Oh yeah, what's that? We can buy 5 million masks from China, and I've got a deal that the hotel will buy, or the hospital will buy them from us. We're going to make $2 a mask, and we'll easily make $10 million this week. Oh yeah, that's easy. 10 million, yeah, for sure. That happens all the time. And people actually believe this stuff. So in the end, there'll be the big producers, the 3coms of the world that in the U.S. Trump had given these guys a nice sweetheart deal to go out and make masks. That's great. You can trust their products. The majority of the masks out there are just, they're garbage. They don't do what they supposedly are supposed to do. They're not actually certified as being good according to whatever the government say they need for protection for COVID. So it's all, at the moment, it's still a big hype scam. So many scams all around the world, and investors got taken left and right on these, mask, dealers. All of a sudden, you got a guy on LinkedIn that, all of a sudden he's a mask dealer. It's same thing in the cannabis industry. Everyone became a CBD guy. Well, now it's the same thing as, my frustration in the psychedelics industry. It's like all of a sudden you got, the SEO experts 2 years ago who became CBD experts a year and a half ago, who then became PPE, PPE mask dealers, and now all of a sudden they're psychedelic experts. And it's like, who are these people? Well, it's standard in the investment world. You see this type of stuff happening, go short. And that's what I see in that whole industry. Tons of great short opportunities. However, there are a couple great companies that will do some great stuff, but few of them.
There'll be very few, very select that come out of it. Something I tell people is, realistically, when this thing's all over, what's going to be the long-lasting effects of COVID? Do I think you're going to have to wear a mask when you go to the hospital? Yes, I think that's something that, at least here in Canada, you didn't have to do until COVID. Do I think going forward that might be something that we never lose? Yes. Do I think that you're going to have to always wear a mask when you go to the bar and stand 6 feet away from people? No, I don't think that's going to be a thing in, hopefully sooner rather than later, a year to 2 years, right? To me, it's kind of crazy to think that's gonna be a thing. Well, you have people that are more conscious of, oh wow, I can get sick, and maybe you'll see the older population start to wear more masks than they did before. Yes, absolutely. But I definitely think it's from an investing standpoint. Look at what the real long-term effects are going to be, and everyone's opinion is different. Look, if you think in your area this certain thing's going to be used like crazy, then maybe that's the investment you want to make. But for me personally, I just can't see 90% of people wearing a mask in the next year.
No, I'm completely with you, Jason. That's a real good summary of how I believe as well and what I think. I'm completely with you. Luca, what do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree as well. The interesting thing, as you mentioned, is the next steps from it. Like, what has this really sparked? And what I really think it has sparked is a shift towards biotechnology, a really good push for the industry, making that hot again. A lot of money has been poured into science and research to figure out what is COVID. And I think a lot more focus has been shifted towards the biological side of us. How does it interact with us? What are some of the preventions we can have? What are the new developments, new biotechnological products that can come up? And I would definitely expect a lot of new biotech companies to do well.
Good summation, Luca.